This day in sports history. It's December 22nd, and on this day in 1982, Wayne Gretzky got in a hockey fight. It's obvious that Wayne Gretzky did not make his mark in the NHL as a bruiser or a tough guy. He beat opposing players and teams with his exceptionally high level of skill, his hockey IQ, and skating ability. And it was rare when the great one got in a fight. In fact, he only got in 3 of them in his career. The Edmonton Oilers were at home against the Minnesota North Stars on this night. The game was scoreless in the first period when Wayne got mixed up with Neil Broughton. A word or two was exchanged, and then Wayne dropped the gloves, but never was able to land a punch. Broughton handled Gretzky pretty easily. Now, Gretzky wasn't completely untouchable at this point in his career, but he was pretty close. NHL players knew that he was a special one, and that their paychecks would be fatter the more he stayed on the ice. But Broughton took a couple of shots, and then he pushed into the ice. Gretzky got 2 minutes for roughing and 5 minutes for fighting. Broughton got 5 for fighting. And Gretzky later described it to be more like a cat fight, and that the two laughed about it when they were in the penalty box. David Gagne was with the Minnesota North Stars at that point and remembered a funny story from that night, saying that 10 guys skated by the penalty box and told Bratzy that he was dead, and 5 of them played for the North Stars. Speaking of guys that you don't expect to see in a fight, Pistol Pete Maravich and his LSU Tigers were playing at Oregon State on this night in 1969. Similar to Gretzky, Pete Maravich was a special type of player who used superior skill and basketball smarts to beat opponents. This was the Pistols' senior season, and he was well on his way to leading the nation in scoring. This was a physical game. The Beavers did a lot of chasing and hacking of Pete. He entered the game averaging 49 points a contest, and OSU did not have the athletes to stop him from driving to the basket, so instead they hacked him. His dad and LSU's head coach at the time, Press Maravich, said after this one that Pete was scratched, battered, and bruised. He ended up shooting 31 free throws in the game and hit 30 of them, which set an NCAA record for makes in a game. After a succession of fouls in the first half, the Tigers' Al Sanders got into a fight with Oregon State's Vince Fritz after an especially hard foul. Pete was on the periphery of the fight, but he ended up having several verbal altercations with the refs. He ended up getting 3 technical fouls called against him in this game, which now would be 1 more than you need to get ejected, but then hardly caused a blink. In fact, of the 2 guys who got into the fight, only Sanders was ejected. Press was also on the receiving end of 3 techs, and he stayed on the sideline. The Tigers won the game 76-68 behind Pete's 46 points. On this day in 1915, peace was restored to Major League Baseball. The Federal League ended operations 109 years ago after a short but disruptive run. It did not initially set itself out to be confrontational to the American and National Leagues. Sure, it wanted to be a professional league, but the original idea was for its teams to develop its own players, not poach them from other established teams. But this was a time many decades before players had any kind of agency over their baseball career, and pretty much once you were under contract with a team, you were theirs until they didn't need you anymore. Well, the Federal League came into conflict with the National League fairly early on, though mostly by mistake. The players that were signed to teams in the Federal League believed that they were free of their contracts in the National League, but in fact, they were still tied to those clubs. Lawsuits were filed, threats were made, the American and National League folks were happy with the status quo and did not need or want a new interloper. The National League threatened players who signed with Federal League teams with a 3-year ban, and if you broke your contract and then signed with a Federal League team, you were threatened with a 5-year ban. They also got Western Union, the internet of its day, if you will, to refuse to send along scores via its ticker service for Federal League teams. Well, on this day, all but one Federal League team accepted a deal, receiving $600,000 to be distributed to 8 teams, essentially buying out the teams and shutting them down, and then allowing 2 of its owners to buy teams in the American and National Leagues. Charles Wiegman, who owned the Chicago Whales in the Federal League, bought the Cubs and moved them to his new ballpark that would eventually be renamed Wrigley. And Wrigley is the only standing monument to the short-lived but disruptive Federal League. On this day in 1996, the St. Louis Blues' Brett Hull scored a hat trick, and along with that, his 500th career goal. His father, Bobby, had also scored 500-plus goals in his career, and thus Bobby and Brett became the first and only father-son duo to score 500 goals each. Later, when Brett scored his 600th goal, they would then become the only father-son combo to each reach that plateau as well. The Golden Jet finished with 604 career goals, and Brett ended his career with 741.
And that's the end of the first half. As the teams head to the locker room, the Spartans lead the Bulldogs by a score.
You guys stink.
Geez, Coach, we're only down a couple of points.
No, I mean you guys really smell. You need to hit the showers. And here, I got every one of you new bars of soap from the Sterling Soap Company. Each bar is artisan crafted using natural ingredients and essential oils. They also have shave soaps, colognes, beard balm, and a whole lot more. Now get in there.
But Coach, we have another half to play.
I don't care. I can't stand to be around you.
A few minutes later.
All right, bring it in tight. You guys are still playing terrible, but you're smelling great out there. Now listen, you're going to need to stock up for the rest of the season. We got a lot of tough games left. So go to sterlingsoap.com after the game. That's STIRLING soap.com. You got that?
Yes, Coach.
Great. Sterlingsoap.com on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Sterlingsoap.com.
On this day in 1956, Bill Russell made his debut as a Boston Celtic. And if you're thinking, this seems a little late in the season for a player like Bill Russell to make his professional debut, well, you would be right. The Celtics had already played 24 games that season, but Russell, along with his college teammate and future NBA teammate Casey Jones, had been playing in the Olympics, which were being held that year in Australia. Of course, with summer and winter being flipped in the Southern Hemisphere, the Olympics did not wrap up until December 1st. Russell led the Olympians to the gold medal, and now he settled in as a pro after also leading the San Francisco Dons to back-to-back NCAA titles in 1955 and 56. Russell scored only 6 points, but he grabbed 16 rebounds in a 95-93 win over the St. Louis Hawks on this night, which was indicative of what was to come. His hands were like a magnet for the ball, and he would go on to lead the league that year in rebounds per game as a rookie, pulling 19.6 a game. And his rebounding helped the Celtics win the NBA title that season, grabbing a rookie finals record 32 rebounds in Game 7 as Boston beat the same St. Louis Hawks that Russell made his debut against on this night. Now that was quite a 12-month span for Russell, who is the only player to win an NCAA title, an Olympic gold medal, and an NBA championship in a 12-month span. Time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact.
What did you say?
In the movie Christmas Vacation, there's a scene where Clark is upset that the lights aren't working, and he punches a plastic Santa Claus. Well, Chevy Chase actually broke his pinky finger punching that Santa, but he kept on going with the scene. And that was the take that they used in the movie. And that's why you see his character Clark begin kicking the decorations from that point on. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.